Alrighty, my name is Elena Tice, and this is my presentation called Sex. Not as crude as you'd think. So, to start off, there are a lot of ologies, and anything that ends with the suffix ology means a study of. With all of these ologies, we are going to be talking about one specific. We are going to be talking about sexology, the study of sex. So, what do sexologists do? According to Psychology Dictionary, it's a study of sexuality in human beings that includes physiology, study of how living systems function, anatomy, study of body and body parts, sexual activity, and reproduction. Those last two are pretty self-explanatory. Sexology began in the 19th century, or the 1800s, which is very recent when you compare it to other ologies that have been going on for a very long time. Sexologists have to focus on objectivity, which basically means that they have to be as unbiased and as neutral as they possibly can, which is easier said than done, especially when you look at the fact that sexologists don't just study heterosexual relationships, but they also look at things that have had a lot of taboo historically, like homosexuality, to things that are a lot more grim, like rape, to things that are really controversial, like abortion. And they get their research and their information by conducting research methods such as clinical, survey, observational, or experimental. Famous sexologists. We're going to be talking about two right now, but I'm going to start with Havelock Ellis on the right. He was one of the earliest modern sexologists, and he was able to identify sexual values and even concluded that masturbation was normal and healthy, which was a crazy idea at the time. He also realized that female and male sexuality didn't differentiate, also a crazy idea at the time, especially in the Victorian times when women were thought of as these very pure beings that had no sex drive whatsoever and who only wanted to have sex for reproductive purposes. And he came to the conclusion that no, that's not true. He also viewed homosexuality as something somebody was born with and it wasn't immoral or a sin or a crime. Again, crazy idea. There's also Alfred Kinsley, and he came a little bit after Ellis, and he challenged the belief that the study of sex should be recognized as a scientific study. And a lot of his research that he came out with got a lot of criticism, because especially at the time, there was a lot of taboo on sex. There still is, but it was very, very prevalent back then. But he believed that masturbation was normal, like Ellis, and a distinct form of sexual behavior, and also that it was important in women's sexuality because women have a better chance of being orgasmic when they're masturbating than they do when they're in a heterosexual relationship. He discovered variations in sexual behavior and even created the heterosexual homosexual rating scale, which is this. Starting off at the 0, you are totally heterosexual. Go down to 6, you are totally homosexual. And if you are somewhere in between, you can go from 1 to 5. There's even an X that some people have to signify asexuality. Moving on to the female reproductive system, I divided this up into two parts, externally and internally, because certain diagrams make it easier to see certain things. I'm going to start off by saying that there is a big misconception that this is the vagina. This is not the vagina. This is the vulva. This is the vagina. This is the vaginal opening. And another misconception is that you pee out of your vagina, which is not true. You pee out of your urethra. And this is your urethra opening right here, this little dot. That is where urine comes out of. If you go right up north to that, you hit the clitoris. The clitoris is the most sensitive part of a woman's reproductive area. It doesn't serve any reproductive purposes, it is solely for pleasure, and it has a ton of nerve endings. Now, if you look at the skin that is surrounding all of the places I have talked about, that is the labia minora, and right out of that, you hit the labia majora, and they act as skin folds to help protect the vagina. Now, if you go up north, the labia majora covers from the mons pubis, or the pubic hair, all the way down to the perineum, or the area between your vulva and your anus. A lot of people think that when you lose your hymen, that signifies losing your virginity. That's not true. You can lose your hymen. It can go away by itself. It can go away by walking, running, riding a bike, riding a horse, doing strenuous activity. Having a hymen does not signify virginity. Moving on to the internally, you can see a lot of the things a lot more clearly now, like the vagina. If you go over to the second diagram, you can see how it's a canal rather than an external part. If you go right left to that, you can also see the urethra, which is also a canal, and then right here's your bladder. If you go back to the vagina and you go up, you can hit the cervix, which is right here. You can also see it in this diagram a little bit more clearer. It's right here. The cervix is the end of the uterus. Going up north to that, you hit the endometrium, or the uterine lining. This is what gets shed when a woman has her period. You can also see the uterus, which is pretty much this. You can also see the uterus a little bit better here. It is a pear shape, and it plays an important role in pregnancy. Now, going back to this diagram, you can either go left or right, and you'll hit the ovary. The ovary is very, very important in the female reproductive system. It makes female hormones as well as ovum, or as a lot of people commonly refer it to, eggs. Even though technically it's not quite an egg just yet, but if you go over to these little squiggly lines, these are your fallopian tubes. Your fallopian tubes help transport the ovum, the egg, the gamete, whichever you prefer, to the uterus. You can also see the fallopian tubes here, and right here's the uterus. You can also see the anus a little bit more clearer here. And then moving on to the male reproductive system, I'm going to start off with probably the most obvious one, the penis. The penis is where urine and semen are dispelled out of, and it is specifically dispelled out of the urethra, like with a woman. Now this is the urethra right here. It connects all the way up into the bladder. The penis is made out of two different types of tissue, the corpus cavernosa and the spongiosum. Cavernosa, there's two different ones, and it is this purple one right here, and the spongiosum is just one, and it is this pink one. If you look over here, you have the glans penis, the head of the penis. There's also the frenulum here, which is not labeled, but it attaches the glands to the foreskin, which a guy may or may not have, depending on if he's circumcised or not. Now, if you go up here, right to the right, you're going to hit the scrotum, or the balls. If you go inside the scrotum, you hit the testes. Go right up here, this little thing that's attached to it. This is the epididymis. And the epididymis helps connect the testes to the vas deferens, or the ductus deferens, and it helps transport sperm. It goes up this thing, and it hits the seminal vessel. The seminal vessel helps create 70% of the semen, and it is a gland. It goes into the prostate gland. The prostate gland controls the other 30% of the semen, and it helps to nourish and protect it. And right before it is expelled, with the bulbar gland or the Cowper's gland, the Cowper's gland creates a mucus to help alkalize everything, and then it gets expelled. Here is your anus, and one thing with the scrotum is that it controls the testes, and it has the ability to lower or get higher depending on the temperature, because the testes are very, very specific when it comes to temperature. Oh, there's also the shaft, which I forgot. But the shaft is like the body of the penis. This area right here. Moving on to Masters and Johnson. Masters and Johnson created a 4-phase sexual response cycle, which I will get to in the next slide. They discovered that women mainly orgasm by clitoral stimulation. Remember how I was saying how the clitoris was the most sensitive part? And they also used behavior therapy to treat sexual dysfunctions and problems, which was very, very effective and is used a lot today. Moving to the female orgasm, there is excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. Now in excitement, the vaginal walls lubricate, the clitoris fills with blood, the uterus elevates, and the labia minora and majora also swell. Now at the plateau, the upper vagina expands, the clitoris hides under the hood, the uterus elevates even more, and the labia also deepens in color. At orgasm, there is contractions in the vagina, in the rectal sphincter, and in the uterus. And at the resolution, the vagina goes back to normal, as does the clitoris and the labias, and the uterus lowers again to its original state. With men, they also have the same 4-phase. There's also late excitement. Now, at excitement, the man develops an erection, and the testes elevate, and the scrotum, the skin around it, tenses and thickens and elevates as well. Now, at the plateau, the penile gland color deepens, the testes enlarge, the prostate enlarges, and the Cowper's gland activates. That's the mucus. Now, at the orgasm, there are contractions in a lot of things. There is contractions in the penis, in the prostate, in the urethra, in the seminal vessels, in the vas deferens, and in the bladder sphincter. And at the resolution, the erection goes away, the testes descend, and the scrotum skin thickens back to its original state. That is the end of my presentation. Human sexuality teaches us about our bodies and how they function sexually. The more you learn, the more you can develop your own sexual identity and become more knowledgeable about your own body and the way it works. As sexologist Dr. Lindsay Doe would say, stay curious, and I hope that my presentation was informative, and I hope you learned something. Thank you.